Your kids and the kids that are in second grade today are going to have jobs that don't even exist today. How do we prepare kids for a world that is so rapidly changing? So it's not vocational training for the workforce, it's educating them in a way that helps them understand who they are and understand the world in which they live and give them skills that are transferable to whatever job they end up doing.
Hey, welcome to Wealth Beyond Riches. Thanks so much for joining us on this new YouTube channel. Make sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss any future videos, especially if you got here from the Streamline Financial channel. We are on the Wealth Beyond Riches channel just to focus in more specifically on what you're looking for, which is a conversation one layer deeper on finances, money, meaning, and purpose. And today we're joined by Tom Stoner. Tom is a good friend. He is the head of school at the school where my sons go and my wife teaches. And we talk about classical education. And if you don't know what that means, we actually take most of the episode to unpack what that is. And it's really going back to the roots of how education was for thousands of years. And this is something that's new to me, but a very interesting topic. So Tom's an expert in this. He has his doctorate in educational leadership. He has a master's of divinity, bachelor's in education. So he has a ton of knowledge, and I think you're going to get a lot out of it, whether you're a parent and have kids in school or a grandparent and have grandkids in school. This is super applicable. So, and the whole goal is to make your life 1% better by something you hear or something you learn today. So please hit subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. This is going to be good. Well, Tom, thanks for being here.
I'm glad to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you are head of a classical school, and my sons go to your school. My wife works at your school. And we have loved it, but one of the questions I get a lot from people is, what is classical education? How is it different from education? How would you break that down if somebody was asking you?
Yeah, it's probably the most often asked questions that I get asked at the school. I meet with all the prospective parents, and they're coming and they're checking out the school. And what is classical schooling? And the way I answer that question, Tim, is that classical schooling is the way education used to be in America up until about 75 or some say 100 years ago.
Okay.
In other words, 75 or 100 years ago, you walk into any school in America, including public schools, and what they were doing looked more similar to what we're doing in the private classical school.
Okay.
And now that's only done in the private classical school.
Interesting.
So
what changed?
That's exactly the question that they say is, Tom, what changed?
Yeah.
That it's no longer, now you have to go to the private classical school to get that. And some big ideas came over to America from Europe, really Western Europe at the time in history we call the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was after the Renaissance. Renaissance was a really human-centered time. It's when Leonardo and Michelangelo did their
the Ninja Turtles?
Yes, that's it.
They were in the sewer, they had slime and pizza. Are you talking about different
the other
guys?
Michelangelo and Leonardo.
Oh, the artists.
Yes,
gotcha.
The artists. Okay. And they, that led into the Enlightenment, and as the term enlighten suggests, it was not so much the discovery of the human capacity of reason, but certainly an emphasis on the human capacity of reason.
Okay.
And that's what the term enlighten means. And there was a lot to the Enlightenment, and it had a huge impact upon America because of an assumption that's pretty easy to understand, that because we're enlightened, that we have this capacity of reason that is very powerful. If you're doing something today the way they did it a long time ago, we can find a better way to do it. And so that's a very simplified version of it, but these ideas collided with the American education system, and led by people like Horace Mann and John Dewey and others, they started looking at the American education system and things like phonics-based approach to reading, where kids learn the letters and the sounds of the letters and all of that. And the building blocks of language, and they'd been doing that not just for hundreds of years, but maybe thousands where English was taught. And they thought, we could find a better way. So when I was a boy, I grew up here in Wheaton, they were emphasizing what they called contextual language learning or whole language learning.
Okay.
And it wasn't like it's a crazy idea, but it was an innovation. It was, let's try to find a better way. Never mind that phonics had proven effective for a long time. It was sort of an optimistic, we can do it better. And this model, this innovation that began then, is called progressive education. But I tell people that reflects the bias. We're progressing away from old-fashioned ideas, and we're coming into new ideas. And so they started changing education as it was done.
Okay. Now, but part of me thinks like, okay, well, we need to change things in order to keep up with the times and stuff like that. Is that an Enlightenment type idea, or?
Well, it can be. The advent of technology was a big game changer, but the progressive model would say, well, this is part of the future, so let's make computers a big part of what both how we teach and what we teach, and that's a cultural trend, but it's a very recent cultural trend. So education is a very old endeavor that goes all the way back to ancient Greece, and that's actually where this term classical comes from, because the idea of education goes all the way back to Plato and Aristotle and ancient Greece, and that's where the term came. So I tell parents that this idea of classical, what happened was, over this 75 years, the national test scores started going down, down, down.
Okay, I was going to ask that. I was like, is there data that correlates with this?
Absolutely.
Switch?
Very clear trends. And rather than someone saying, this isn't really working, maybe we should go back to the way things, it actually accelerates the innovation. Well, let's try something new.
Okay.
And so what happened was 40 years ago, an educator wrote a book called Repairing the Ruins, talking about the American education system, and his argument was simple. We should go back to the way things were before the progressive education started moving in a direction, and that began the classical school movement. And it's not new, it's very old.
Yeah.
It's just, let's go back to the way things were. And what began 40 years ago, now there's 2,000 classical schools across the U.S. It's the fastest growing private school model in the U.S. Because it works and kids really learn, and more parents come and say, look at what's going on, and say, now grandparents say, that's the way education was when I was a kid. I love this stuff, classic literature and grammar and cursive writing. And we teach Latin and mastery of the English language, all these things. So grandparents love it, and more parents are like, this is the way I want my kid to learn, and that's why it's growing so fast.
Yeah. So walking into a classical school today, how does that, what does that school look like compared to the public school down the street in my neighborhood?
Well, great question. A few examples. It's not like it's 100% different in every way. But in a classical school, it's both what is taught and how it's taught. So in a classical school, you have all the desks facing the teacher, and the teacher is directing the learning from the minute the kids sit down, the day starts, to how the subjects go and transition. And the teacher knows, I know what I want you, what you need to learn in order to get ready for the assessment, the quiz you're going to take for next year and for your future. And so my job is to teach it to you. A lot of education today is more student-directed learning, and it's a lot of value put on student choice, and that with the idea that authentic learning happens when a child wants to learning that. So sometimes in a and sometimes in a public school class, you have groups working around the room, or a lot of project-based works.
Yeah. I remember teaching high school math, my first career, and for a while we did let's put half the students facing each other, 2 sets of desks facing each other.
Yeah.
Because it was math, and that way we had access to both whiteboards, and we didn't have to go, hey, turn around in the back of the room. There were 2 fronts of the room, and we could use all the whiteboard space possible.
Well, yeah. A lot of it is the content of what is taught, you know, and I suspect you agree that, you know, you don't believe everything you read on the internet, but
this podcast though, 100% is true. This is all true.
All true. But you've seen over time, you know, look at this 5th grade quiz from 1940, and you look at it, and it's like, boy, that's senior in high school, you know, kind of stuff today. And, you know, again, I don't always trust that that's a 5th grade quiz from 1940.
Right.
But there's a point of it is that the substance of education and what is taught and what kids need to learn and are able to learn and even want to learn. Kids love learning real things about the world. And the world's a very interesting place. So often education today is underestimating what kids are able and ready to do. And so the classical curriculum is intentionally rich and substantial learning. And kids in 1st grade are talking about the structure of government in ancient Greece, and their parents are going, did you just say something about the structure of government in ancient Greece?
Yeah.
And it strikes them, but the kids find that very interesting. And that's just an example. So
our example was the dinner table. Our youngest was in 2nd grade, so he's walking through Greek mythology. And my older 2 daughters, they're junior high and high school at this point, and they've read all of Percy Jackson and plus another series around Greek mythology. So they know Greek mythology from Percy Jackson. And our youngest starts just rattling off what he's learning about Greek mythology. It's like, hey, buddy, what'd you learn today? It's like, well, you know, there was Ares, there was Kronos, and then he like ate his children. And then he starts rattling off all these gods and goddesses. And the girls are like, he hasn't read Percy Jackson. How does he know all this? He knows like all the names. He knows all the stories. Like what's going on? Yeah. And I was like, buddy, how are you picking all this up? And he was like, she tells stories and I like to listen to them. And we were blown away. We were like, oh my gosh.
I hear those stories all the time. Exactly what you just said is I was blown away by this. And there was a time when every kid in school read certain books. In fact, you weren't even educated until you read, you know, Huck Finn and, you know, as you get older, the Iliad and the Odyssey and some titles that have stood the test of time because they're classic literature. Well, classical education restores that. And there was a time when education was a transference of the ideas that have shaped Western civilization from one generation to the next. But we've moved away from that and thought, well, let's just teach them how to read. We don't have to worry about what they read. Whereas classical education would say, they have to read certain books. And we also see it in writing. College professors would say, no one learns how to write clearly and well today. It's a lost art. Well, we've got computers. We got spell check. Why would you teach spelling when we've got spell check? And Grammarly, well, there's times when you need to know. So we teach grammar and spelling and cursive writing because there's always times that you have to write. And so that's what I mean by it's the way it used to be.
Thinking about those books that we all used to read, what is it about those pieces of literature that make them stand the test of time? Like, what are the aspects of those books that, hey, just read whatever, reading is good?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I often parallel it to junk food versus really good quality cuisine. And what's the difference? Both are good tasting, but in a different way. And with literature, we want our students to cultivate an appetite for really good literature. And that's why books have stood the test of time when they're really good.
Yeah.
So even in something like music, I talked to the music teacher and it's like, what songs are our kids going to sing in programs? Let's sing the songs that we think they're going to be singing 100 years from now. So if you think about music today, how much of it do you think is going to be being played 100 years ago because it's so good?
Yeah.
Well, probably not very much.
Yeah.
Maybe some, though.
Yeah.
And, whereas Bach, Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, we're talking about hundreds of years now, and we're still listening to it because why? It's really good music.
Yeah.
And some of that literature has been century after century is being read. But unless kids read it and are assigned it, then that's the only way they can cultivate an appetite. It's like eating that meal at a really good restaurant. And when they taste it, it's like, wow, and you realize what is really good versus what is not really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when my wife and I were investigating the classical education movement, and we're like, what's the deal? Like, what is this exactly? I remember that analogy of there's a lot of, this isn't every school, but it's a lot of education today that is, it's time to eat, and we're taking just a potato and chopping it up into little cubes, and we're feeding it to the kids. So they get sustenance, but when they go to eat again, they're not excited to where classical education would say, here's a buffet of things that are good to the eye, pleasing to eat, also nourishing. And also you can go back to a buffet and go, hey, I want more of that. I want more of that. I want to go deeper in these areas. Talk to me about classical education and how students are allowed to go deeper in some of those things that they find compelling.
That's another great part of classical education. Rather than just sort of a gloss over the surface of things, classical education is wired to say, let's go deep on fewer things. Instead of trying to cover a lot in a really shallow way, let's go deep on ideas and explore them really deeply. And one of the teaching methods that marks classical schooling is to ask the question, a lot of it in the method of teaching, what teachers learn, is how to ask the question that every hand in the room doesn't immediately go up. Instead of what happens is their minds start turning and churning on the question you just asked, because it takes thought, and they're making a connection. They're thinking about it before it comes up, and then the hand goes up and offers an idea. And that's what that method is uniquely classical. This is what came from ancient Greece. Plato's Republic is all the method of the way he wrote his book was to ask a question of the people that he had with him, and then they responded. And then he didn't answer his questions. He then asked another question. And the way he was teaching was through the use of really good questions, and that led them to come to understanding. So that's an important principle of classical teaching.
Yeah. Sounds like that other guy from a long time ago who had 12 disciples and often asked questions without giving the answer necessarily.
Yeah, that's true. That's true a lot. Or telling a story that the people hearing didn't immediately understand what he's talking about. How many times did the disciple ask those questions? I don't know what he's talking about. But they would be thinking about him later. It wasn't like that was their one time to talk about it. It was they were going to be wrestling with that. And that's part of the education. It's like a muscle that gets built by exercising it and working it. And so we talk a lot about kids learning how to read widely and think deeply and write well. This is some of our goals.
Wow. That's really cool. How do you integrate the classical school that you lead is Christian? Are all classical schools Christian or?
Great question. Almost all of them are.
Okay.
The movement began classical and Christian. But, however, the growth of the movement has spread widely so that now and kids learn of socioeconomic diversity. It's not just for, elite students. It's not for wealthy students. It's working so well. Kids learn of diverse populations, both socioeconomic diversity and ethnic diversity, that you're seeing it in a variety of places now, including inner cities, and many of these are charter schools, which are not Christian. Are using the classical method because it's so effective in preparing kids to learn.
Yeah.
And it's both teaching kids to learn well, but we often talk about learning to love learning. And that's a second thing, rather than a dreadful, thing that we have to do. Is the model is engaging, and it tends to spark this curiosity that you said of your son. She tells stories, and I find them interesting to listen to. So I want to learn about them. That's sort of sparking this interest. And then when they got that, they pursue it, and they learn more. And then knowledge becomes like intellectual capital that they use.
Yeah, that's so good. And we've seen that in our youngest of his. He's transformed in terms of, I used to not like school. I used to not like going, and second grade was like, let me get used to the rigor of this curriculum. Big adjustment period, but then last year in third grade we just saw, oh my gosh, he has a lot more autonomy, responsibility, and he's also loving what he's doing.
Isn't that great?
Which is super cool to see.
When I meet with parents, and you've got people listening that are parents and grandparents, and whenever I'm meeting with parents, I say, education is one of the most life-shaping influences in a child's life. There's a lot of reasons for it. You spend a lot of time at school, Tim. You're there for 35 hours a week at least, but it's more than what the time. It's what you're doing while you're in school. And, the kids don't have to be told, you should try to figure out what this world is all about. You should try to learn what the meaning of it. Part of being human and made in the image of God is we are pre-programmed to wonder, what's going on here? How did I get here? What's the meaning of life? What happens when we die? And school is a big part of this puzzle assembly, trying to figure out what's life about. And a lot of what they study is what we've discovered in the world over the years, about chemistry. And you used to teach math, about math and how it works in school. But in a Christian school, we add a dimension that is of education that can only be done in the private school today because of the separation of church and state, is to add questions informed by what you believe about the world beyond what you see. And that's the realm that ultimately is rooted, morality and ethics are all, why is that true? Why is that wrong to do that? And that helps kids assemble an understanding of the world that is complete. It's not missing this dimension that we set aside because we don't want to go there. It's very much part of, so they're wrestling with that. And it also fits together in a cohesive whole. And the value is very soon these kids hit adolescence, and you know what that's like with kids. Adolescence is when they separate from what their parents believe and figure out, what do I believe? And we want our kids to have, and they push against everything. But we want them to have something clear against which to push. And then that's a valuable thing because they're less vulnerable to the winds of culture. What are the latest ideas? And the winds, and then what their peers believe. We want them to have a clear understanding of what they believe.
So you would welcome them pushing against kind of what they're being taught, or what is the meaning of all this?
Well, again, that is part of education and the wrestling with ideas, and to give kids space to wrestle with those ideas.
Yeah.
And, some schools don't necessarily give the space to do that, there's a right answer and we want the kids to say the right answer. Well, that's not necessarily authentic if they haven't really wrestled with it themselves. So I keep saying Billy, but Billy, what do you think about that?
Yeah.
Billy, what do you believe about that?
Yeah.
So they're wrestling with ideas in the classroom, and that's what education is all about.
Yeah, I like that when you that idea of when you set the spiritual dimension aside. I mean, whatever faith background someone is coming from, it's hard to. This is just me. I think it requires more faith to believe that there isn't a spiritual dimension to things. When you look at the world around us, you look at the beauty, the goodness of it, what is true. It's hard. It takes a lot of faith to believe that you were an accident. You know what? Let me read this real quick. This is a regular story, I think, that people hear. You're an accident. You came from nothing. You're here for no reason. You'll be dead soon, and nobody will remember you. Like, that takes a lot of faith to believe that is the case. And it's also a super sad existence.
It is.
And sort of bring that into school and go, there is a spiritual side of things.
Well, that's the value of combining, this method that we call classical education that was effective and in place for centuries, maybe millennia, with the Christian dimension being not just legal, but sort of part of the daily life of wrestling with education. And you're touching on something I think very important. You also made me think of C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity. He said, atheism is far too simple, because you say, well, there is nothing. Well, you're leaving a lot unanswered. Well, then how do you explain? And so to just dismiss it, it's far too easy, and you're leaving too much undone.
Yeah.
But you made me think about, and this is a great question for people listening to ask, is what do you think is required for your child or your grandchild to flourish in their lives and to be fully alive and to be the people that God made them to be? What is required of that? And that's a complete understanding of life and why we're here. What's the meaning of life? Why are we here? How do we answer the origins question? How'd you get here? Like you said, you were an accident. How did that happen? And what happens when you die?
Yeah.
That's pretty important consideration for it. And so this is very much a part of the education. And I know that parents and grandparents want that for their kids. We talk to grandparents all the time that among their most important goals in life is to contribute to helping their children and now their grandchildren flourish. And how can they be used in part of it? And the potential investment in education, we've got a lot of grandparents that are part of their child's education. And so exploring what would be so valuable for my child to be challenged in these ways and to learn to, what model and where are they going to learn the ideas that are going to give them a vision for how do they become fully alive in their lives and capture a vision for what their unique, we often use the language of calling in work is, and have a vision for how they can work into that and find what that is, because in doing so they will find that's when they become fully alive and engaged, when they're doing what they were made to do and gifted to do.
So how does, on a practical level, how do you think classical education prepares? I had a bunch of other questions prepared, but I love where we're going here is how does classical education prepare somebody for the workforce?
Yeah.
How do you see the role of classical education in that?
Well, great question. Classical education is, you've heard the term liberal arts education. That's really how education began. And this was the model that came from ancient Greece, where in order to be truly educated, and the term liberal there is not a political term, it means freely educated. To be truly educated, you have to learn all the different subjects, right? You can't say, a kid in second grade doesn't decide, no, I'm going to go into medicine, so I don't need to learn history or...
But they decide they're going to be in the NBA, though, at that point.
Right, that's true.
I'm not signing up for any other sports. I'm just basketball from here on out, guys.
And so this idea of liberal arts, learning all the various subjects. So the way classical education contributes to kids' future and work is this. Your kids and the kids that are in second grade today are going to have jobs that don't even exist today. So, Tim, how do we prepare them for jobs that don't exist today? When I was in second grade, there was no such thing as a computer. And so how do we prepare kids for a world that is so rapidly changing? So it's not vocational training for the workforce. It's educating them in a way that helps them understand who they are and understand the world in which they live, and give them skills that are transferable to whatever job they end up doing. If you can think deeply and analyze a situation and figure out what is the best thing to do, and if you can write well and communicate well your ideas in writing and thinking, then what job won't be well served by that? And so we talk a lot about preparing kids by helping them learn the ideas that have shaped our culture, build skills of writing and thinking and being able to synthesize materials and stuff. And this is what is preparing them for whatever walk of life they'll end up doing, which they'll find out. I have a son in college, and he thinks he's the only 20-year-old that doesn't know exactly what he wants to do for the rest of his life. But he'll figure that out.
Yeah.
But what he's doing is building skills by learning to think about the world in a way, and himself, and about God and relationships in a way that whatever he does end up doing, when he finds that what he's uniquely wired to do, he'll be prepared to do it.
Okay. Yeah. So the argument just popped into my head of, well, if the jobs that our second graders are going to get when they graduate don't even exist today, then it seems like a progressive model of education that's more keeping up with the times would be better suited for that.
It would be better suited to trying to keep up with the immediate times.
Yeah.
But what if the immediate times get phased out? Like, think about programming. You're a math guy and science and stuff. And, when computers first came out, all roads were leading to, boy, we got to teach our kids how to do the language and be able to create. And there was just a high demand for programmers and things like that. Well,
even my high schooler now, I remember being like, hey, girls who code, like, you got to do that. And now AI is just coding everything. And
look at how that's changed. And so there was a lot of roads. The whole STEM movement and everything was, and it's still valuable because a lot of jobs will interface with that. But if you're thinking about vocational and what I'm going to do, the coders have been greatly reduced now because of, as you said, AI. So one thing's and then what's next? And that's why these transferable skills, to whether it's law or medicine or finances or teaching or being a policeman or whatever it is, ministry, if you know how to read widely and think deeply about things and write and communicate well, you're going to be well served in all of these jobs.
Yeah. When I think about the need with something like AI, for example, which is a broad topic, But the question of what is true, to be able to think deeply about it, is the video I'm watching real? Or is what this person is saying real? Or is this even true information? You don't just need information. The information's all out there, and it's at our fingertips. Right. But it's learning what to do with the information.
Right.
And how to discern what's good and what's true.
That's another great thought about what is the goal of education. People listening are thinking about, what do you want your child to learn in school? When I say the questions that they ask about life, really ultimately what we want our students, what our children or our grandchildren to learn is truth. You just said the word truth. Well, what is truth? And you've heard this a bunch of times. Well, your truth is your truth, and my truth is my truth.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that's how truth
you do
works.
You do you.
Yeah. Truth corresponds to reality. And so what you're asking, is this true? Does this correspond to reality? Is it real?
Yeah.
Cultivating the ability to determine that is terribly important for a child's future. And because of the enlightenment that we talked about at the start, I often use the analogy in my office when I'm telling parents that, in the realm of what we see, people don't get away with your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. If I say, Tim, how do you like my pink shirt? You say, well, Tom, you're looking sporty. That's a nice shirt, but it's not pink. And I say, well, for you it's blue, but for me it's pink.
Yeah.
You're like, that's not how it works, Tom, because you can take something pink and say, Tom, look at this.
Yeah.
Put it next to your shirt. Those are different. They can't both be the same, but that's all because we put it, it's the realm of what we see.
Yeah.
What about the realm of what we don't see? So you think like faith and God and truth in that dimension. Yeah. Well, what the Enlightenment did was say, since we can't prove it by experiment and repeated conclusion over and over, that's what science is, anything goes in that realm. Your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth, and we all get along. Well, we believe in a Christian, in our school, that there's truth in that realm as well. And that's what we want our kids to understand and know. And that's definitely a part of their understanding of the world in which they live.
Yeah. Well, and I like how you said, too, it gives them something to push up against. If there is no common language or common morality, it's all thrown up in the air. And we don't really have something that's the same that we're talking about. We're just all making stuff up. Yeah,
interesting. I just James Cameron, who was the director of Titanic and stuff, just made a comment about AI, and he said because there is no shared morality and ethics among the people that are working in the realms, it's going to be very difficult to put in place things that would safeguard that because there's not that shared thing, and that's a great loss to our culture.
Yeah. I just used one of the AI tools. I asked it a technical question about my phone, about how to do something, and it started giving me relationship advice and was like, I can't tell you how to do that per my ethical policy.
Oh, is that right?
And I'm a good person, and I was trying to do something good, and it was like, no, I disagree with what you're doing, so I'm not going to give you that information. And I was like, if I'm a creep or a criminal or something like that, I see why that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
But I'm actually trying to restore a relationship, and you're like, no, that person has put up a boundary. And I'm like, what? Yeah. What?
Interesting. Who would be the one to put those boundaries in place, and where'd they get them?
Yeah. It's so interesting. So, Tom, this has been so helpful. I think you've got the book, The Idea of a Christian School. You guys can read it. It's out, Amazon.com. And I've got my wife's underlines in here.
All right.
But I'm sure you talked about a ton that was in here. And so.
Yeah, I did. It came out of my doctoral research where I looked into what is it we're trying to do in the Christian school, and I was ahead of one at the time, and I dove into different bodies of literature on worldview and philosophy of education and things, and I just realized how little I understood about the ideas that are so critical to a child's growth and education, and that idea had been it hadn't been well articulated of what is the advantage of a Christian school in the life of a child. So the book is the idea of a Christian school and why it matters for the child you love, to try to stabilize some of those and challenge parents. It's a primer. It's not It's not 500 pages. It's 130 pages, and it's an introduction to ideas of education and why they're so important to every child.
That's awesome. That's really good. I love to end every episode with one final question, and that is really for people to get to know you better, which you've done a great job telling us about you. But what is one thing that you're loving right now? This could be anything. It could be a product. It could be a moment, a person, an activity, a habit. But what's one thing you're loving right now?
Oh, gosh. What a good question, Tim.
I can give you a minute to think, and I'll go first.
Okay.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
So one thing, this is I'll call it a habit or a practice that I stole from an author named Andy Crouch. And that is, he goes out his front door every day and looks up at the sky. I think, how often am I just walking around, eyes to the ground, like I don't look up very much. And he just goes out and looks up at the sky, says a quick prayer of just like, thank you, God, for today. And it's just a way to like start the day in gratitude, breathe in the fresh air. Any time of year. I did it this morning. I think it was 19 outside. But there's something about it sets me in like where I need to be, or it gives me a proper perspective of I'm not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
There's a huge world and a huge sky that I can't even comprehend how big it is.
Yeah.
So that's mine.
I love that. I love hearing that. When you ask the question, what I thought of is, I already showed you a picture outside of my granddaughter, who's 2.
Yeah.
And we just had her running around the house for 5 days. She lives in a different part of the country than my wife and I. And I know there's something, what am I loving now is just, I never thought, I've never been a grandparent. This is our first. And to see, my heart literally melts when I see her. Right? There's something so precious about her. And it's just a part of the way God made us in families and with kids, and then a grandchild. It makes life so precious, and that was just a part of life that is so great.
Yeah.
So that's something that I love right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Tom, thanks so much
Yeah.
for coming on. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom with us. This was a way more, I would say, intellectual conversation than most that I'm having with people. So it was really, I learned a lot.
Well, I hope it was helpful. I sure enjoyed it with you. Thanks for making it easy.
Yeah, for sure.